Hi guys, and welcome to the first episode of Tasty Tuesday. Tonight we are doing some Fettuccini Alfredo, a nice simple dish for the start of the channel. First, what I'm going to do is take my nice little bread knife. I got a loaf of sourdough bread here. I really like sourdough because it gets really good and crunchy. Lots of air pockets, lots of space to get crunchy. So we just go ahead and cut that up, and I have my oven preheated at 400, and I usually leave it in there for about 6 minutes. If you don't like the ends of the bread, you can always take them and let them go stale and then bake them in the oven. Generally at about 400 again for about 8 to 10 minutes, and it makes really good croutons. You can like soak them in olive oil and put whatever seasonings you want on them, but it makes really good croutons. Of course, with any kind of knives that we use, we're going to make sure our hand is being held kind of like that, and keep that away from the blade, because even though a bread knife is not very sharp, it still will cut you. They're not supposed to be sharp. They're supposed to, I mean, of course any knife is supposed to be sharp, but they are supposed to get through bread. You see it's kind of designed a little different. That's to help it. It's almost like a saw blade to help it get through the bread, because most typical chef's knives do not have the edging on it. It'll make it tear, it'll make it do weird things. It's just not fun. And you can slice this however thick or thin you'd like to do it. I like mine a little thicker. And this is just store-bought sourdough. I may cover in a later episode how to do your own sourdough. Once I get me a nice starter. I gotta look it up, but there's some place that apparently, I think it's like San Francisco or something like that, that has apparently this really good sourdough starter. And like, they sell water from the city that it comes from with it, just to make sure that it tastes just like it would there. You can always eat any leftovers or anything that is unwanted. We'll toast that little piece. So this goes in the oven at 400 for about 6 minutes. Our next thing that we're going to work on is getting our chicken. Now, for my Fettuccini Alfredo, I typically like to have about 1 chicken breast per person. I mean, normally that's about what you would eat in a meal anyways. And it honestly depends on the size of the breast though. You're cooking for you, you're not cooking for somebody else. So, or if you are cooking for somebody else, you know what they like. Now for like that breast, it's not terribly big, and you're gonna have some kind of shrinkage when you cook. So your size, like the amount of meat that you have, is going to change a little bit. So we'll go ahead and do 2 because I gotta pack some for lunch tomorrow. I don't like too much excessive fat, like there's a little bit of that fat right there. Check this other one. Yep, there's a little bit of fat there, so we're just going to cut that off nice and easy. You don't have to be fancy, but if you want to be fancy, you sure can. But I like to cut it into nice, manageable, bite-sized pieces. This helps it cook more evenly, and it makes it more manageable in your dish. Makes it easier to work around. You do want to try to get all of your pieces a relatively uniform size, just to make sure that all your stuff is cooking at the same speed. You can make sure everything is done at the same time. And with chicken, to make sure that it like stays nice and juicy when you're cooking it, one of the things you want to do, instead of going for a high heat, like generally when you are cooking, high heat is a bad thing unless you are making pasta. And even then, that's only to bring the water up to the boil. And of course you want to keep it boiling, but just do not start on high heat. So with chicken, you want to go with a medium to a medium low heat. This way you can monitor it a lot better, and it helps it stay nice and juicy, especially if you have enough hydrating things in the pan, like any kind of liquids. And one of the things that I like to do personally that I think kind of helps it a little bit is I like to work with chicken that's like just barely thawed. Like it's not, there's still some like really super cold bits in it, kind of half frozen bits. And I find that that little bit of water in there kind of helps keep it nice and juicy. And again, I'm not the best about the correct cutting methods all the time. So just try to stay as safe as possible. You know, I have cut my hand open a few times with good old chef's knife here. One of the other things about the chicken is there are still going to be some remnants of fat. Makes it a little harder to cut. If you do not want any like fattiness, you always have the option to cut that off. In the cooking world, fat does tend to hold flavor really well. So if you're having trouble keeping flavoring, you could honestly even like go buy bacon fat and like, or keep your own, kind of help the flavor. It's like MSG almost, you know, it just adds to the flavor. To season this chicken tonight, I'm going to be doing a very simple little setup here. I'm going to be doing salt and pepper. That is the basis of cooking, and just about every dish that you cook is going to have salt and pepper in it. Those are flavor enhancing spices. Italian seasoning. Typically that has things like rosemary, thyme, oregano, basil, parsley, some stuff like that. I've even seen some that have dill in it. It adds that dill flavor to it, but it's really good. We have garlic powder as well, and then onion powder, and that's like literally one of the simplest, it's some of the most readily available. That's another cool thing about this dish. So the bread is done. As always, ovens are hot. Things that you cook on are hot. Use something to protect your hand. You're gonna set it right here. One of the tests that you want to do for your bread here, that's how you know it's done. It gets nice and crunchy. Get a little olive oil in the pan. What separates good Alfredo from magnificent Alfredo is a nice little cheese called Parmigiano Reggiano. Now, your store-bought Alfredo sauces, they work. They're very heavily cream-based, and if you ask most Italians, like legitimate Italian restaurants, their basis for Alfredo sauce is Parmigiano Reggiano, a little bit of pepper, butter, and pasta water, which in the culinary world is liquid gold. You can use this for a bunch of different things, but that's nice. It pulls up, you know, it's got all those starches in it from the pasta. With this, I mean, you know who you're cooking for, so you can kind of do it based off of that. Generally, you want to start with about a half a cup of freshly grated Parmigiano Reggiano. And I find that the smaller you do it, the smaller you grate it, the easier it melts. That way you don't have clumps in your sauce. With your sauce, you do not want to start with a high heat. Now, I like mine a little more cheesy, so that's a little over half a cup. And it's smart to do it on a plate, whether you have a grater like this or one of the bell-shaped ones, like the cowbell-shaped ones that you stand up. Yeah, plates tend to catch all that stuff. The way I like to do the sauce, I do a half meat between the traditional Italian way and the American way. I like to do a little bit of heavy cream in there and then just some fresh butter. You can do about a half to a quarter of a stick depending on how buttery you want it to be. But one of the most important parts of your sauce is going to be your pasta butter. We have fettuccine noodles. I like them. They're nice. They're not too broad, but they're a little broader than spaghetti noodles, so they hold sauce really well. And I like to go with bronze die cut on a number 5 for my fettuccine noodles. The bronze die has a little bit of a rougher texture. It, once again, holds the sauce better. And they're also dusted with flour, and that helps with your pasta water. That liquid gold that we're talking about, this makes it more golden. This is the upgrade. This is after you've shined the gold. This is that. You kind of want to guesstimate. I mean, I like pasta a lot, so I'm going to make a good bit of pasta. That has a little bit rougher of a texture, and I don't know how well you can see, but it's kind of flour dusted, so it has a nice, almost like a matte feel to it. With your pasta water, what you want to do is you want to heavily salt the water, and I like to add a little olive oil. helps it not stick. So we're gonna let that get to boiling, and then we're gonna start on the chicken and the Alfredo sauce. With your pan, I have a little bit of oil in here. I've been preheating this. I like to preheat my pans and pots beforehand. One of the things that you want to do, like to test your oil that I put in this pan here, is oil tends to be a little thicker. So when your oil runs like water, when you can just move it around the pan really freely, that's how you know your pan's preheated well enough. Okay, we're gonna get some nice sizzle here as this drops in the pan. There we go. And once again, you want this on medium heat. We just kind of drop our chicken in there, get it nice and separated a little bit. That way you can watch everybody. Now this is the way I like it. You customize it the way you like it. Get a good helping of salt in the pan. And I like fresh cracked salt and pepper. I like the taste a little better. You can use just regular table salt and regular pepper. Don't go too heavy on the pepper. It's hot. It has a nice hot flavor to it. And then a little bit of Italian seasoning. Good bit of garlic powder. Now, I do like to use fresh garlic with this sometimes. Fresh garlic, it's just unbeatable with the flavor. But tonight I'm a little bit lazy and I'm trying to keep this simple as possible. So, garlic powder. And then last, but certainly not least, is our onion powder. Garlic powder and onion powder are like salt and pepper. They work well with each other. They accentuate each other. Accentuate each other's flavors. Just a little bit of that. And get it nice and stirred up. And we're already, even on that medium heat, some of that chicken is starting to cook really well. So you can kind of let this sit, especially on that medium heat. It typically won't burn. As long as you do not turn that heat up, it's not going to burn. And keep an eye on it. Next, we are working on our Alfredo sauce. Typically, you want to start with about a half a cup of heavy cream. And depending on how you want it, you can go a little more, a little less. Get that right in the pan. You want to add your butter. Now, it's going to take a little longer if you start with cold butter. This is already room temperature. So you want to plop that in there. Kind of stir that around a little bit, and when the butter is completely melted, you want to add salt, pepper, your pasta water, and then you want to add your cheese, of course. Now that our pasta water is boiling over here, I'm going to go ahead, kind of let it fall into your water, kind of guiding it as you go. So we'll watch it for a minute. Let it get soaked and it gets a little more loose. That way you can push all of it down. And you don't really want to start watching your time on that until all of it has gotten into the pot. You want to make sure that your pasta is cooking as evenly as possible. And I like my pasta a little more tender, so you want to let this go for about 12 minutes. And make sure that you're stirring this pretty consistently. You want to stir it about every minute and a half to 2 minutes, if not more frequently, just to make sure that your pasta is not sticking. Okay, so as we've got about 5 minutes left on our pasta, we're going to go ahead and start working with the Alfredo sauce. And you kind of want to stir it around, make sure that nothing is sticking to the bottom, because the heavy cream, if you put too much heat on it, it will start forming on the bottom of your pan, and that's very hard to get off. Plus, you don't want burnt taste in your sauce. Keep stirring this, making sure that none of the noodles are sticking. I mean, if some of the noodles stick, then, I mean, whoever complains about having more noodles stuck to their noodles, am I right? You just don't want it sticking to the pan. That's the part we don't want. Our butter is melted in the pot, so just because our noodles aren't quite done yet, we're going to cut back the heat because we do want some of that pasta water in our sauce. So we're going to let it sit for a little bit. It shouldn't burn as it's going. So your chicken, you want to keep working with it as you're doing your other things because you don't want it to burn. But if you keep it on a low enough heat, it shouldn't burn. It should be fine. Everything should cook thoroughly and it'll still be juicy. Okay, so our pasta is done now. We're going to turn the heat back up just a little bit on our sauce back there. I'm going to pull this off of the heat. Remember to turn off your eyes when you are done with them. And I have a nifty little tool that you can clip to the side of your pot instead of using a strainer, but you know, most people have a strainer, so use what you have. And I like to have a little measuring cup ready for the pasta water. I save about 3/4 of a cup of that pasta water. It is still very hot. And remember, do not put your noodles back on the heat. They're going to stay warm because of the residual heat in the pan, and you do not want them to burn. We go ahead and get that heat back up to a medium. We're going to add our pasta water to this. You're going to add just a little salt and just a little bit of pepper. Not too much. And then we add our cheese. Kind of slowly sprinkling it in there, kind of mixing it as you're going, just to make sure it's incorporating really good. And you want to let this go until your cheese melts. You don't see any real clumps in there. Typically goes about 5 to 6 minutes. Okay, so kind of as your sauce begins to thicken up, you want to go ahead, take your noodles that we have here, add those right on into the chicken. And while your sauce is still hot, woo, that handle is a little hot. Do this. And you want to add it straight in there. It's going to look a little watery. Don't worry. Don't worry. We're going to let it sit on this heat for a little bit with all the starches that are still left on these noodles and with this chicken, and it's going to thicken up real good. Okay, so as your chicken sits here and simmers for a little bit with everything else in the pan, kind of want to keep an eyeball on it. When it starts bubbling a little bit, I want to kind of just stir it around. And one of the best tests to see whether or not your sauce is thickened up well is when you run a spatula across it. It will not leave any kind of streakage in the pan. That way you know your sauce is good and thick. Give it one last stir just to make sure everybody's coated, everybody is happy in the sauce, and then you plate. So I like having mine in a bowl. You can do something fancy, put it in a plate. We are going to use some tongs. Get it in there. Oh, that looks fantastic. Get a little more of that chicken in there. And to make a great meal better, we're going to have some parsley flakes. You can do fresh parsley if you'd like. Tastes a little better. A little bit of parsley. I like a good bit. And then, to make things even more magical, remember that Parmesan we had earlier? We're going to put a little bit of fresh Parmesan over the top. I like a lot because I'm a cheese guy, you know. Cheesy guy. And then you have a nice, beautiful bowl, if it doesn't fall out, of chicken fettuccine Alfredo. If you guys would like to see more of this content, please like, comment, and subscribe down below. There's also going to be a link to the Discord that I am part of in the description down below. Come join us for some fun on Apex Legends. We are a community based around Apex Legends. We like to play a lot, and we like to have fun. I'll see you guys next time.